Greetings all. Thank you for joining me on the Listen to Your Footsteps podcast. I've always been fascinated by why and how people do what they do. This podcast is a way for me to put a spotlight on Africans in art, culture, media, design, and all the spaces in between, and chat to them about their journeys, perspectives, and the like. It's an extension of a book I wrote a few years ago called Listen to Your Footsteps, in which I reflect on my own journey, including fatherhood, identity, and life in general. I try to bring that to every conversation I have. Enjoy. I'm joined on today's episode by Jason Goliath, comedian, entertainer, I'd also say entrepreneur.
Yeah, I'll accept that. And entrepreneurship being the most difficult of the three.
But the one that people actually don't see a lot of.
Yes.
Well, from the outside. The reality is like Goliath and Goliath as a starting point.
Yes.
Just that concept is a business.
It is a business, and it had to be a business. And I think the reason I say it's the most difficult and most important is we exist in a time where talent is not the thing anymore. How hard you work the system is the thing. And having a little business backing our comedy venture has been, I think, the smartest move we made from inception, easily.
So I read a quote recently from Andre 3000.
Yeah.
That people were not...
The great philosopher, Andre 3000.
People were not going into music and creating music for music, the craft of music.
Yeah.
But it was literally to get a paycheck.
100%. So it's devastating. So my articulation is we exist in a time where hype supersedes merit. Hype is the thing now. People will buy hype over talent, hype over quality, hype over everything. So when we were schooled, what you did was more important than who you told what you did. So your execution was more important. Now we're in a time where execution actually isn't that important. How many people you were able to tell is important. So the poster on social media is more important than your actual performance on stage. And that's a devastating time to be in as an artist.
How have you navigated that? I mean, let's go back to the start. So were you the funny kid in school?
Yes, I was always the kid that liked making people laugh. But at school, I always, and even then I was just conscious of it was a crutch to be able to tease back and not constantly be the one that was teased, because I was always the one that was teased. I was always overweight. Primary school already, I had spectacles, braces, and overweight. It was like the trifecta of roasting is what it was. And then high school, I joined a youth group at our church and became friends with some older boys, and then their thing was just roasting each other. And I started roasting along with them. And then when I tried roasting at school, all of a sudden I was the king of the diss. And, high school was very different, therefore, to primary school. Because not only could I roast you, but I also found that, the ability to make anybody laugh just made life easier. So you're in less trouble in the principal's office if you can make him laugh before you have to deal with why you're in the principal's office. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that was something that I just always enjoyed, making people laugh. So as a kid, I was the kid that memorized jokes so that I could tell them to people, because I loved the fact that I can tell you a story and that would make you laugh whether you like it or not.
How much were you exposed to let's say, stand-up comedy in that time?
Not at all. I think the only exposure I had to stand-up easily until the late 90s was Raw and Delirious, which, the first viral comedy set.
Yeah, Delirious.
And, you kind of watched
classic.
it on a cassette from somebody's house after school illegally. And I couldn't believe how funny it was. Like my brain couldn't properly process just how funny Eddie was, but also the fact that this guy's being funny, just telling us stories. He's just telling us, he's talking about an auntie falling down the stairs.
Yeah.
And I am, just blown away. And it was the fact that you could say whatever you wanted, and if you arrange the words correctly, people would not only want to listen to it, but want to laugh.
And there's a commonality of experience.
Yes.
I mean, he was coming from a American and a Black American perspective, but in terms of the experience, didn't matter where you came from. Let's say in Africa, etc., there were elements of it that connected.
A commonality of experience makes it easier, but I think the true greats, and I think what I don't think it's fair to say that what Eddie did there was a commonality of experience. I think what he was able to do there was an exercise in relatability, where even if you don't have experience of waiting for the ice cream van or a family cookout within a black family. He could draw that picture for you so that you could relate to it, understand it, and be entertained by it. So even if this is completely outside of your world, he can use his words to draw pictures to invite you into his world. So you watch a movie about Mars. That movie has pictures and a storyline telling you about Mars. You can't relate to Mars. You've never been to Mars. You've never thought about Mars, and you're not a scientist. But the movie finds a way to make Mars understanding, interesting, and palatable. And I think that's what he does. I think that's what we all do.
You went on an interesting journey, but we're going to leapfrog. It feels weird.
Let's jump around.
You and I have had so many
100%.
conversations. So in some instances, like I know some of the background.
Yeah.
But at what stage did you kind of go, okay, I can actually do this thing beyond roasting, being funny, being the person who's going to get the laughs?
So,
in the friendship circle, there
was deep imposter syndrome around it. Firstly, just because nobody I knew personally was even close to being able to do it. So it was always something I was fascinated by. And I remember in the early 2000s starting to go to the club that I did my first ever set at was the Underground, which was run by John Vlismus. Yeah. And it was easily our most iconic comedy room in South African history.
I used to run poetry sessions.
Yeah, the birthplace of modern comedy is what I like to call it. And I would go and watch almost every Sunday with my mates. And at the time I was emceeing on weekends at Macro. I had this gig where I would sell high value items in bulk over the microphone. And it was, I was trained with what do they call it? The selling technique had been patented globally, and it was this globally patented technique that I was trained in. And it was amazing. And I was very good on the mic, but I also realized that A, I can sell, but B, I love the attention of the microphone. I love the ability that when I talk, nobody else gets to talk. There was something really, really, really exciting for me about it. So everybody just has to listen to me. And I really enjoyed that. But even though I was going to watch comedy every week, there was nothing in me that said I can be as good as these guys. Then, while I was working at Macro, Joey Rasdeen's sister is the cash office manager, has been and still is. And Joey Rasdeen would come to the store, and eventually I plucked up the courage to say to her, hey man, the next time he's in the store, I'm such a fan, please introduce me to the guy. And she did. And when she introduced me to Joey, she said, Joey, this is the guy I've been telling you about that I think should be a comedian. And Chava's her name. And I still said, no, Joey, don't listen to Chava, man. I'd make some flow jokes here in the store, while I'm doing it. And she said, no, Joey can do the thing. And Joey was so kind to me and, said to me, hey, whenever you're ready, call me. And I never did because I didn't think I could. Then, when I started going broke, I owned an insurance brokerage that went under in spectacular flames. And the start of that collapse was the 2008 financial crisis. And my business is in the middle of crumbling. I got no bucks. And Chris Rock comes to South Africa. And the mate that I used to go to the Underground with every Sunday says to me, listen, I'm going to go watch Chris Rock at Sun City. Let's do this. And I'm like, dude, I don't have money to get to the office next week. You're talking about Chris Rock tickets. And he goes, and still one of my best mates, and he says, so Riza says to me, yeah, but guy, I'm not going without you. So here's what we're going to do. I was going to buy an expensive ticket. I'm going to buy 2 cheap tickets. We're going to Sun City. Guy buys the cheapest tickets available. And I'll never forget, 5,000 people, Sun City Super Bowl. I'm literally sitting in the last row. I got my back against the wall. That's how far back from the stage we are. And at the time, I was a fan of comedy, but I wasn't a huge Chris Rock fan. It was great that Chris Rock was coming, but I wasn't for me, Bernie Mac was my guy. He was my spirit animal, and Rock wasn't even in my top 5, I'd say, easily, globally. And I go watch Rock live, and it changes my life completely. It's the funniest show I've ever been to. At some point, this tiny man standing in the middle of 5,000 people with nothing but a microphone has 5,000 people in physical agony. At some point of that show, you are hunched over, and my stomach, all I wanted was for him to stop just for 20 seconds, just so I could release, because he just kept hitting us. And I was like, can you release? And I remember in that moment looking around and realizing that everybody in the room felt that way. And my brain went, that's power. This guy don't have a gun. This guy don't have a weapon. This guy's not waiting for you outside or holding your kids hostage. This guy has a microphone and he's telling us jokes and literally has a physical command over everybody in the room. And my brain went, I want that power. But I still didn't think I could do it. So that's 2008. 2011, my business has now gone bust. I've lost everything. I decided, okay, let's try maybe acting and presenting. Let's try this entertainment thing one more time. I got nothing to lose because I've lost everything.
Yeah.
And by everything, I mean everything. I'm in a situation where this would be my last time to try entertainment if I was going to. Because my perception of entertainment, because my mom worked for Mnet for like 25 years, which meant I always saw famous people. You know what I mean? Seeing famous people, my mom was PR manager. It was a common thing. But it also helped me see that these famous people, they're wearing brand name clothes, but they were all living in old VW Beetles. They were broke. And so I was like, also, there's no such thing as rich and famous in South Africa. In my 20s, it was all about money. And that's why I didn't pursue entertainment. My 30s, I go, hey, last chance. Money, but even when I had it, I wasn't happy. So there's something wrong with that equation there. Let me try and chase it from a different angle. And my equation, you know this equation of mine, was success equals happiness. And then in my 30s, it became happiness equals success, because it's the same sum, but if you read it the other way, instead of chasing the money, I chase the happy, and the money now becomes a byproduct. So I go, I'm broke, I got nothing to lose, acting and presenting. Start going for auditions, get pretty lucky. Well, maybe it's not luck, but my hit rate is insane. Like 1 in 2 auditions I go for, I'm booking the job. I have a wonderful time. I get this big Casa Lager campaign, and I meet Sivingesi for the first time, because him and I are booked in the same job, and personalities align immediately, and we immediately laughing and making jokes, and we shoot for 5 days. And at the end of the 5 days, Siv pulls me aside and he's like, bruh, you should try stand-up comedy. And I'm like, dude, I'm braai funny. You know what I mean? Like you said, I'm funny with the Owens.
Yeah.
Stage funny and braai funny. That's 2 different WhatsApp groups. It's not the same thing. And the guy gave me the best answer any friend has ever. He just looked at me and he said, dude, I'm not saying you're going to be the next Trevor Noah. I'm not saying you can make a career as a comedian. I'm saying you obviously like people. You obviously like to make people laugh. Try it as a hobby. Those are the words he used. Try it as a hobby because I think you'll like it. And I had that conversation a few weeks later with Nicholas. Nick and I were drunk on a Mother's Day afternoon, and I said, hey, this guy says I must do this thing. And Nick had tried comedy twice before that and had one good time. His second time was bad, never went back. And Nick is like, hey, it's been a few years now. He's also ready. And the next day, Nicholas makes the call and makes the booking. Calls me to wake me up to say, hey, we've got a booking 3rd of July, 2011. And I go, are you crazy? What are you talking about? And he goes, no, we agreed yesterday. I'm like, I was drunk on Black Label, my friend. There's a contract. You can't make deals on calling my darling. And he says, hey, this auntie gave me a hard time. It was then John's partner, Tafia, gave him a hard time about both of us being on the same day. And she was like, we take this thing seriously. Don't play the fool. You and your cousin want to come here on the same day. And Nick was like, yeah, I'm not phoning that auntie back to say, please, can we cancel? We got 6 weeks. And I always credit Nicholas with making the best decision I couldn't make for myself, because I was stalling for some reason. I watched comedy for 10 years and kept making an excuse why I can't do it. Nick puts me under pressure. We have 6 weeks. And I just remember saying to him, okay, cool. Tell your wife we're going to the underground every Sunday for the next 6 weeks. I don't want stories, just so we can figure out what comedy actually even is and watch it from an eye of somebody who's potentially going to perform. We did that, and my life changed on that day. I felt, the word I use is, I felt the universe seat. You know when you're screwing your petrol cap in, and then it's in, but then you just click. You know what I mean? And just click, then now it's in. I felt my universe seat. I can't explain it. It was overwhelming. I'd never enjoyed myself that much. I'd never felt that level of fun. I'd never been that excited. And my brain immediately went, you've got to do this as much as you can as a hobby. So you've got to work as hard as possible doing all the other things so you can afford to do this as a hobby. And that was the greatest gift ever, was Siv just changing my mentality a bit and saying, don't come in it to have fame, acclaim, or to be the best, but first just try it and see if it does something for you. And it's still my favorite thing.
There's a guy whose writing I follow, and one thing he writes about often is hobbies. And like my realizing that, I'm a Gen X. So I remember when we started doing our CVs.
Yeah.
And on your CV,
hobbies.
There was always hobbies.
Yeah.
And was reading, watching television. And
whatever it is,
there was hobbies.
Yes.
And part of that transition that we've taken, the world that we've created today, is everything must be monetized.
Yes.
So you don't think about anything without thinking,
absolutely,
okay, but how am I going to make money off this?
You must, if you haven't had a conversation with Tats and Konzo recently, do yourself a favor. Tats has been on this journey. So when lockdown came, he reacted very differently to all of us. Well, the way he describes it, he says, I went to the bank and to see how much money I have. And I said, hey, you got a lot of money, Prami. I just check on my phone. Like, I mean, I don't have to go into the bank. I know generally off the top of my head. So he laughs and says, I checked his app, worked out how much time he could survive. And if he really squeezed 18 months, then he made a decision to take the next 18 months to not think about money. And his words are, you will not believe what your mind is capable of when money isn't your leading thought or the first thought or a thought that has to justify. If you are able to create without money as a motivator or a necessity, he was like, your mind will be blown. And I can't explain how jealous I am of his space that he's found, where he first makes his decision based on passion and the way he feels about a thing before he has to do feasibility studies as to whether this thing will, bankrupt me or keep me in my lifestyle.
This is the Listen to Your Footsteps podcast, a journey into the life and perspectives of Africans living on their own terms. I also have an email newsletter, a book, and even music playlists available on my site, kojobuffer.com. Let's get back to the conversation.
It's an interesting approach. I have a friend, I don't know if he still does it, but already a good 10 plus years ago, he would work, and then at the end of a particular period, he would then take a sabbatical. I think he used to take a 2-year sabbatical.
Yes.
So he knew what he needed every month.
Yes.
So he takes the sabbatical when he's reached the point where
100%.
he knows he can cover
himself.
that period.
Yeah.
And then at usually like 18 months, he'd start kind of just putting feelers out for consulting work, so that once the 2 years ends,
he's already back
literally
in,
jumping straight into work.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for my family, I took a different route, which was I got to the point where I said, I want to live a retired person's life.
Yeah.
The money will catch up. So the money still hasn't caught up.
Yeah.
But I made the decision to prioritize time over like money and working for money.
Yeah.
So now I'm at the stage where I have certain things that I do because I've always wanted to do them.
Yeah.
And I start them without thinking about,
can I afford to do this?
Well, not even can I afford, how am I going to make money off it?
Yes.
So the things that I start, like this podcast.
Yeah.
One can monetize a podcast.
100%.
It's work, and I come from a media background. I come from a business background.
Yeah.
I have an understanding of how to go about it.
For sure.
But the reason when I started, for close to 10 years, I wanted to start a podcast. And then eventually I got to the point where it was like, okay,
it's time.
I'm going to start the podcast. And I fund the podcast, editing, studio, etc., through other work that I do.
Which I want to tell everybody to do.
Yeah.
So like my sentence is always trying to encourage people to go and chase your happiness, go and find your happiness. And I think people speak about happiness so seldom that when I speak about it, they start thinking I'm a hippie. They start thinking I'm one of those kumbaya brothers. You know what I mean? And I'm like, no, I'm just trying to say that the only thing we have is time. And I don't want you to fall into that trap that 99.9% of people who have to exist in a capitalistic environment will fall into, where they're going to tell you that you must work hard now, sacrifice your time now so that you can have this golden years later on. And weirdly, the person who helped me make the most clarity of that was my wife's uncle. Is late now. But early days of dating my wife, Sean, she says to me, you have to meet my uncle. He was my late dad's best friend. So he's a late dad's best friend, also a mom's brother. And I go, yeah, cool. And she goes, no, he's a priest and a retired school principal. And every comedian fiber in my body goes, hey, I don't want to meet this uncle, man. Because I'm the type of guy that I'm myself everywhere. Yeah. You know what I mean? My rule is simple. If I can swear in front of my mother,
priest, principal.
Priest,
like combined.
Combined. Like, I'm like, yo, this Bali, there's no way he's going to like me. Like, the fiber of me is designed to annoy him because I'm not going to speak to his rules. Because my rule is simple. If I say something in front of my mother or do something in front of my mother, best believe I don't love you enough to not do or say those things in front of you. So my mom is my barometer, and I'm already like, hey, I'm anxious. And I remember getting to the Bali's house, And he's obviously at home during the day. His wife is at work, so it's just him. Come in, he gives my wife a warm embrace, extends his hand. Warm, as you'd expect. He's a priest. So expect a warm embrace. And I'm like, hey, how's it? Big smiles. But my spidey senses are up.
Yeah.
We sit down and cross my heart. 5 minutes in, the Bali looks at me with a bit of a stern look. And he says, listen, is that cigarettes I see sticking out of your bag? And I go, yes, sir. So he goes, so you smoke? I go, yes, those are my cigarettes, sir. He says, hey, man, my wife is only going to be back in an hour. Let's have one quickly. She doesn't like it when I smoke. Let's go and have one quickly. So immediately when he says that, I change my whole tone of the Bali. I'm like, Bali, you on my side. You cool. We go, we have a smoke, we end up spending a beautiful afternoon chatting. And the last words, and weirdly, this is the last thing this man ever said to me in his life. He said to me, I'm going to say this to you because I think you've got a good head on your shoulders, and it's a sentence I can't say to every young man. He said, work is overrated. And I said, Bali, what does that mean? Please break that down. And he said, you are going to work your whole life for this money, and then you're going to get the money if you're lucky and be far too tired to spend and enjoy the money. So he said, my only wish for the two of you is that you find your balance early. And, people use those cliched sayings of, live like you're going to die tomorrow, plan like you're going to live forever. But we hear those things and we yes and we know. And this man was so serious about the fact, and I could see it in his eyes. He didn't know he was ill. This was, pre his diagnosis, which took him pretty quickly. He didn't know he was ill. In his mind, he thought he even still had time. But even then, he was so conscious about the fact that he wished he enjoyed his life more and the time and the days more. So for me, I think COVID shook a lot of people out of that, where they realized, hey, we don't have time. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter how much money you have, how educated you are.
It shook them, but also I find that people reversed so quickly because of desperation of being things the way they always were.
True story. And that's how humanity is going to be. We're going to default to the normal. But long story short, it was, I really try and live those words in terms of emulating. I love that idea of I wanna feel retired now. So I'm in a space where somebody says to me yesterday, and see, you've got a few hours in your diary this afternoon. Please, can we just shoot these things quickly? And I go, no. And they go, why not? I say, because Thursday's open. So come on Thursday. Rather take an hour out of my Thursday and give me the afternoon today, because I'm not doing that to myself. And they can't understand. And I go, no, I'm not frantic. Just because you're frantic doesn't mean I'm frantic. Because for me, people go, what's your favorite thing to do outside of, work and stand-up comedy? I go, doing nothing is my favorite thing. Nothing makes me feel more successful than the ability to say, no, thank you. Yeah. I'm staying at home doing nothing. Doing nothing. My wife goes, what does that even mean? So she goes, what do you want for your birthday? Nothing. Then I go, let me articulate that for you so you're clear. It's not that I don't want a gift. What I want is, I don't want to have a plan in the diary. Yeah. I don't want to have somebody waiting for me. I don't want to have a schedule. I want to sleep until I'm done sleeping. When I wake up, I want to assess how I feel and then decide how I want to spend my day once I've felt what I'm going to feel on the day. Because we spend all our time being ruled by diaries.
Not necessarily the whole day. Literally just, okay, from here.
Yes.
The next hour.
100%.
Like, am I going downstairs for a coffee?
Come on.
Or am I going to try and negotiate for a coffee to be brought to me? Am I like?
Yes.
So I sleep in on weekends.
Yeah.
So I've reached the point where I don't work on weekends.
Yes.
And I'm a freelancer.
What a pleasure.
Right? But I'm just like, like I've worked hard in my life. And I don't have, like, I may work hard. I may put in the 20-hour days.
Yeah.
And I've done that, and I didn't have more money than I have today.
Exactly.
And I still had the debts that I have today. So rather, let me have some peace of mind.
And time.
So generally, also my children are older now.
Yeah.
So, because I woke up with my kids. The wife doesn't do well with limited sleep. So I literally woke up with both my kids.
Yeah.
So everybody lets me sleep. I wake up when my body has decided it's time to wake up.
What a pleasure.
And then I FaceTime. Could somebody make me a coffee, please?
Listen, you live a good life, my friend.
Right. And for me, that's what the last couple of years have been about. And the last time you and I were having a conversation, what you're talking about now, I could see you going through that, that evolution or that transition.
Because we would associate busyness with successfulness. And I don't think it's that. Yet we understand that, everybody's version of success is different. Everybody's version of happiness is different. But there's no pressure put on any of us to then articulate that version. Because I believe the more you articulate, so if you can admit that your version of happiness is different to mine, yet you spend no time trying to articulate your happiness, you will forever be vicarious with that happiness, looking at other people's things and thinking that that's what you want, thinking that that's what's going to make you happy, thinking that that's going to satisfy you. Where I'm just in a space where I'm very, very clear on what I want, the type of life I want to live, the type of story that I want my life to have been. And I speak about this so often because I don't see how you can be asleep behind the wheel when somebody's just told you you've got the wheel. You know what I mean? So if you are clear that you are in control of your life, why then? And I think that weirdly, I have these conversations a lot with Nicholas Goliath. We work on a project called the Happiness Economy, and in our conversations, it's become very clear that it's easier to be unhappy. So it's easier to be plugged into the matrix than it is to be unplugged and realize that you're in control. So you must make the decisions. And it's simply because, like, from our calculations, it's because it's easier to hold other people or things accountable for the way you feel. And blame them. So you want to go, the government, my boss, my wife. You know what I mean? You want to blame them because it's easier to be unhappy and blame than to take accountability and create your own happiness. It is a weird concept, but it frustrates me. So when I hear you saying, I'm retired already, I'm aiming for exactly that. I don't need a bigger house. I don't need a fancier car. I don't need more. Except time. That's what I need more of, more time. So now we start making smarter moves, I suppose.
Has that impacted or influenced the type of work that you choose to do?
In a big way, yes. So just like, you've worked hard enough to be able to say, even as a freelancer, you prefer to not work on weekends. I've worked hard enough to be able to say no, thank you. So my first kind of question is, if I get a proposal or a pitch or an invite to do something, am I going to have fun? And to me, that translates to, will I be able to have a good time there? Because if I'm going to do anything, because I'm so time conscious, I leave home with the intention of having a good time. Because I find very often, people leave to have a bad time and then are shocked that they've had a bad time, but you've been complaining about this thing all the time. So there's a lot of cliches like, don't be the cloud, be the silver lining. You know what I mean? But for me, if the more fun I'm having on stage, the more fun the audience is having. So generally, I try to have a good time. And, I talk to myself in weird phrases. So instead of saying I have to, I say I get to. So I change the word have to get to. Because just psychologically, because I know who I am and how sensitive I am, I even have to change the way I communicate with myself, because that influences my experience of whatever it is I'm about to experience. And I find just those small things. And I'll give you an example. I come from, just before this, I did a gig I'm a United Nations ambassador for UNHCR, which is their refugees division. And we did an Africa summit, but so we're talking about refugees with a whole lot of the partners on the continent. So you've got about 8 different countries there, all government officials. So they're already boring and it's a terrible audience. Sorry, but it's the truth. And it's being held at the Holocaust and Genocide Center in Parkhurst. So think about, you're a comedian, and the first lines you read are refugee, Holocaust, genocide. This is not a place for jokes. This is not an occasion for jokes. So your brain wants to go, why are you inviting a comedian? And it's so easy in that moment to go, there's no way I'm going to have a good time. Then I leave home this morning and I've got to go, you know what? Who gets to say they do stuff with the UN? Then I go, I've never been to the Holocaust and Genocide Center. So I'm going to see this new space. And I walk in and the room is terrible. It's exactly as I've imagined. It's full of bureaucracy and, protocol and all the stuff that I'm anti. And the representative from South Africa goes up and the guy looks like Tay Diggs. the guy sounds like Taye Diggs. So nobody smiled all day. When they introduced me, I'm facilitating a panel conversation between all the countries. And I go, listen, before we start, sir, I know people are scared of you because you're basically the head of United Nations in South Africa. But me, I'm not scared of you. I can tell you that beard of yours is unnecessary. You're far too handsome. How do I feel sorry for people and look at your face at the same? I'm a man and I've got a crush on you. You know what I mean? You sound like Taye Diggs. And the whole room bursts in laughter because once I connect those dots, they all saw what I saw and in some way possibly thought what I'd thought and now love the fact that I'm roasting the most powerful man in the room, which is like prison rules, you know what I mean? So if I go to jail, you got to fight the biggest guy to get respect. So in my mind, comedy-wise, if I fight the biggest guy and we laugh, you're going to set me up for the rest of the conversation. And I had a great time. You know, so all things considered, if you look at the stat list, I should have had a terrible time because you're asking a comedian to come and speak about refugees at a Holocaust and genocide center. And I had a great time, but it's that perspective of deciding to have a good time because it's easy to have a bad time. And I just feel like everybody's waiting for somebody else to give them a good time. Then I'm like, I'm not leaving my good times in your hands because I like good times. So if I'm going to hold you responsible for my good times, I'm going to end up disappointed. So I find ways to make sure that my good times, my happiness, my motivation, all of that stuff's on me. There's no expectation. Like, do you know how long it took me to chat to my wife about the fact that I'm not responsible for your happiness? I can be a catalyst. I can amplify your happiness. But at your core, you are responsible for your own happiness. I can't make you a happy person. I can't do that. I can do things for you. You know what I mean? I can do things for you. But if you're going to hold me responsible for your happiness, you are never going to be as happy as you can be. And to explain that, so you say to your wife, I don't hold you responsible for my happiness. She's been, socialized differently. She doesn't understand it the same way I do. And it took a long time to get through that process on its own to go, listen, we have to be happy within ourselves. I've got to love me, be happy with me, accept me. You've got to be the same. That provides the opening paragraph for compromise because that will show us how far we can go, what compromise really is. But if you're unhappy to start with, compromise is torture. You understand what I'm saying? Compromise is becomes nearly impossible and often results in conflict. But it's the taking responsibility and not blaming anybody because it's so easy to blame.
Yeah, I mean, but so my cheesy description of marriage in particular is like the rings on the front of an Audi or the Olympic rings. My wife and I are opposite enough or different enough in terms of personality for me to realize that basically it's two rings.
Yes.
Finding enough overlap to justify trying to build something together moving forward.
Yes.
But there's the overlap, but there's still what's outside of the overlap. And that doesn't go away.
No. You're still you, and you'll always be.
Because the only time it goes away, for me, the idea of two becoming one means one is absorbed.
Yes.
Or one is sacrificed.
Yes. Those are words that people must write down.
And I guess also being married to human beings with strong will and personality.
AKA colored woman, yeah.
Strong will and personality. It was also important to learn that, which is, it feels like an extension to what you're saying in terms of we are each not responsible for the other person's success.
Yes.
At the same time, each person has, it's what you're also doing is that the one thing that we own are our dreams, right?
Yeah.
From when we're young. However haphazard they may feel, however distant they may feel, however they may evolve, that's what we own. Like we truly, truly own because we carry it within us.
Absolutely.
Going into a relationship with somebody is deciding to put the success of that dream is no more dependent just on you.
Yeah.
It's also partially dependent on the other person because you'll make decisions.
Yes.
Take into consideration the other person.
Yeah.
So, and they're doing the same, they're doing the same for you.
Yeah.
But it's like the I feel like I'm rambling, but it's
like you're not rambling at all.
It's like that whole oxygen, and I know people have used it before. When the oxygen mask falls down, they say, "Put your mask on."
I use that all the time. That's my favorite saying, my favorite line.
Put on the mask first before you help a child.
Yeah,
because you're trying to help a child and you're not getting oxygen.
100%. If you pass out, you can't help nobody.
Exactly.
You can't help nobody. Because before that announcement used to be mothers traveling with children. So in the older days, they used to say mothers traveling with children in the event of an emergency, please put your own mask on first. And as a kid, I couldn't understand that. How can you ask a mother, the person who loves this child more than life itself, to look after herself before looking after a child? So I use that description to talk about the importance of happiness and the counterintuitivity within happiness. Happiness is not like other emotions. The happier you make yourself, the happier, the more ability you have to make those you want to make happy. But the less happy you are, the less tolerance you've got to make other people happy. So you've got to put your own mask on first. You said some very interesting things around getting married, and I wish I'd had that conversation before getting married. It's one of the things that nobody speaks about is you have dreams and a vision for the way your life is going to pan out. Getting married means you're going to have shared dreams and a shared vision. And I think it's easier when you get married young, but I got married at 38. My wife was 37, which means not only were we very clear on our dreams, but our dreams were in HD, because in your 20s, you don't know how hard life is going to be. So you can dream as big as you want, very often unrealistic, which I think are important dreams to have. But your 30s, you become far more conscious of what your dreams cost. You know what I mean? And I was very, very clear on what I wanted, how I wanted to do it, and got married without thinking of how the plan would change, how it would be impacted. And it's taken, Sean and I will be together for 5 years in Jan. It's taken that time for my brain to start adjusting to the inclusivity, because also these dreams are mine. I'm very, you know what I mean?
And you've had the ups and downs, you've stumbled, you've fallen, you've started afresh.
Yep.
So now it takes into consideration all of that.
Yes.
And a stronger understanding of yourself and your ability.
And a deep understanding of consequences I don't want to enjoy again. You know what I mean? Because I've been burnt. Now you put your hand on the stove, you don't want to put your hand on the stove. Now you've married someone who's never put her hand on the stove.
Yeah.
And she's curious, man. She's curious about stoves. She wants to, and I go, don't touch there, you're going to burn. You know what I mean?
This is the Listen to Your Footsteps podcast, a journey into the life and perspectives of Africans living on their own terms. I also have an email newsletter, a book, and even music playlists available on my site, kojobafo.com. Let's get back to the conversation.
So what's interesting for me is I always felt I married late.
Yeah.
And I married at 30.
Yeah.
And then you married at
38. Yeah.
Which is now a total different experience, right? And so when I got married, for example, I always wanted children.
Yeah.
And then we struggled to have children. So I've written about this and I've talked about this.
Yeah.
Once I went through the process.
Yeah.
I had to answer the question for myself.
Yeah.
Whether if we couldn't have children, would I still want to be with this person?
Oof.
So fortunately, I kind of came out of it and went, yeah. I'll stick around.
Yeah.
And then I had 2 kids. So everything worked out. But I reckon at 38, it's a slightly different decision. Would you say it's more about the person and going, do I want to spend the rest of my life with this person?
Absolutely. I don't think it's even. I think the question stops becoming, do I want to spend the rest of my life with this person, and can I spend the rest of my life without this person? And so I was very clear that I may not, if I knew what I wanted, I would have been with somebody. So I don't think I was clear on what I wanted, but your experience at 38 definitely highlights what you're very clear on what you don't want and what you won't tolerate. We started dating when I was 35, and I very, very clearly remember being in a space even before we'd gone on our first date that I'd realized I don't want to waste another 6 months, was the way I articulated it to myself. So I don't want to be with maybes and possiblies, because I don't have 2 years to waste with you and then realize this is not working and then we don't figure it out. Which actually led to, Sean and I, you've watched me speak about this stuff on stage, where I speak about the fact that we had therefore a very different beginning, because I said to her that I'm not going to kiss you. Like, after I was already attracted and there was already chemistry and we'd been on the second date. First date ended a bit abruptly. She'd fallen off her mountain bike that day. And second date, it was kissing time. You know what I mean? She was ready for this. And I said to her, hey man, I'm not gonna kiss you. And I always use the example of, my standard 5 sex ed teacher said, don't kiss girls because kissing leads to sex. And that was he was simple. He was like, if you don't kiss, you'll never have sex. It's simple. The easiest way to not have sex is just don't kiss. And I said to her, listen, I'm not going to kiss you. And she said, what do you mean? I said, no, man, I don't have 6 months to waste. And I know that I don't want to be with somebody that can't integrate completely into my life. And what that meant was, before I dated people where I've got my friends and my girlfriend. Now, not only do I have my friends, but my friends generally are my work colleagues because, we're this tight circle, and I see them being able to have a relationship outside of the circle. I want you to be able to fit in the circle, which means I need to date somebody that I can roll with, somebody I feel comfortable hanging out with, somebody that I want you to be my wife, but I also want to be able to be your bra, which was something that had never, crossed my mind before. And we spent the first 3 months seeing if we could hang out together, seeing if we were cool in all the different environments, if what I did excited her and what she did excited me, and whether or not she was comfortable being next to me in all the different environments that I find myself in, and the same for her. So that question of, do I want to be with this person if kids are not the thing? You know what I mean? Does the love of this person supersede my need to have children if that's not going to happen with this person? I think is a question every marriage should answer before going in, because if you don't want to be with that person without kids, chances are you're not going to survive that person with kids, because it doesn't get easier with kids. Kids don't make it easier. You know what I mean? So if you're going to, and I keep saying to people, like, marriage is the hardest thing I've ever done, and I'm convinced I'm doing it with the best possible person. And it's still the hardest thing I've ever done. So even if you're doing it with the right person, it's hard. So my equation changes because, I mean, I've never been broody. I've never wanted to have kids, but I've trained myself to not think about it as a lose. Like, the world goes, what do you mean you're not having kids? Like, I'm losing.
Yeah.
And I go, no, it's a win-win. My wife and I have decided to not have kids because we've chosen a different lifestyle, and kids wouldn't fit into the picture that we've kind of created and are happy with. But if we do happen to have a glipsy, or I put one past the keeper, I think we'll be great parents because I think we can afford to have a kid, and I'd love to, raise a child with her. So there's no lose. It's just which option would you prefer? But there's no lose. You know what I mean? So people go, but what if you do that? Will, and I'm just like, no, but that's not the way my brain processes it. All I know is I love her, and whatever version of my life I'm in control of, I want her to be part of that. Of that version. So let's start there and find our contentment there. And thank God she's on the same page as me. We talk about it all the time, but I honestly think that I'm never going to have kids, and I'm very cool with that.
I mean, I guess it is this being able to wean ourselves off all these little bits and pieces that society said we should do.
Yes.
And whether you're doing it or not.
100%.
So I have the 2 children. So, like 2 children, boy, girl, picket fence, etc., etc. But it's like, no, but this is just my reality. It's not an ideal.
Yeah.
It's not abnormal. It's just mine. And for the next person, it may be different.
Yes.
That's all right too, as long as there's some consciousness to it, some reflection around it. So it's not it's happening by accident, because if it was happening by accident, you wouldn't have been able to comfortably, if you were buying into what society says,
100%.
You wouldn't have been able to
100%.
comfortably answer the question around your relationship or navigate your relationship itself.
So then why is it not easy? Because you say it like it's a normal thing, but that's not a normal way of thinking. Generally, society doesn't think that way.
Yeah.
Generally, society wants everybody to be doing what they're doing and are very uncomfortable with people who choose a different, life or lifestyle. That's why we have wars about religion, because, everybody wants everybody to think and do the same. And then once you realize that, guys, as long as what you are doing is not causing harm to me or anybody that I can see or know of, why do I have a problem with what you're doing? Why is it so important that you have to be like me? Then I'm 110% to each his own. You know what I mean? Find your thing, do you, and be happy. There was it's the second time I'm quoting this thing today, but there was a meme little video that went viral last week. And a short story just goes, a man's cell phone rings in church during a church service, and the priest stops everything to scold and reprimand him. After the service, all of the people in the church do the same. Some ignoring him, and some keep agitating it and just making him feel worse about how dare he in the most important part of the service. Why would he not have his phone on silent? And everybody just shouting at him. The man ends up at so down in the dumps, he ends up at a bar on that Sunday afternoon. And as he walks in, the bartender can see he's not well and says, listen, your first beer's on me because I can see you got some problems. And everybody at the bar keeps going, are you okay? Tell us what's wrong. Talk to us. And many people bought him drinks and chatted about his story and empathized and sympathized. And the man ended up going back to that bar every single day and never went back to the church again. And the final message was, my fellow Christians, this is what the story said, my fellow Christians, just a reminder to not only be Christian, but to also be a good, kind, and loving human being, and to live by those rules. Then that is my problem with most of society. So a Christian in the church, that's supposed to be the least judgment, the most empathy, the friendliest space. But and I'm not coming at Christianity. This is applicable for any sector where you've got bad human beings. You know what I mean? But it's that reminder to just be a good human being, because it costs us nothing. Make somebody happy. Try to find your own happiness. Just do no harm and get on with it. But a community that I come from and that you married into have an issue where colored people will support you until the second you're doing better than them. And then all of a sudden they'll say that you're trying to be better and will not support you. And it's that weird type of thinking that I don't know how you weed it out. I don't know how you change people's thought processes to go, exist in a space of abundance. What's Kojo's is Kojo's. If Kojo succeeds, good for Kojo. I want to be able to celebrate every single one of your wins without feeling, why Kojo? Why not me? No, my things will be my things. You know what I mean? And generally my things are consequences of my activity and my action and my effort. So, I can't be angry with Kojo because I'm sitting at home. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And how do I get that mentality to change is one of my biggest things that I ponder on. How do I get everybody to know what they want so that they are comfortable in celebration of others? It's a weird thing.
How do you work with family?
Business-wise?
Yeah.
Business-wise, firstly, I'd suggest nobody work with family.
So I asked this because I realized my wife and I don't working together.
Yeah.
The minute I see somebody working with spouse, relatives, etc., it's always my first question.
It's easy for us in the Goliath and Goliath side of the business with Nicholas, Donovan, and Kate, simply because money has always been a byproduct from inception. The business wasn't started in the hopes of making X amount of profit, and there weren't spreadsheets and red and green and black. They were just, we were just doing the thing we love and trying to do it to the best of our abilities, and money was always seen as a byproduct. And when you have clarity of roles and responsibilities and money is not a driver, because what happens is it's easy to start a business when everybody's broke. But once there's money, then, somebody's got to be the boss. Somebody's got to say where the money goes. And that's where conflict then, ends up coming. So I always say, if your business is a simple business and profit is the objective, you're going to have problems working with family if not everybody shares the same objective. Nicholas, Donovan, and I, 3 completely different comedians. Yes, we share stages and we share audiences, but there's been this organic sharing between us where we're deeply able to celebrate each other's wins to the point where when Donovan wins, I feel like I won. I see Donovan have a good day, I want to pop champagne in celebration thereof. Kate is the perfect conduit because, again, Kate fulfills a wonderful administrative role, but has no ambition to be on stage. Doesn't want to have what we have, you know what I mean? Wants to do her side of the business and doesn't want to do our side of the business. And Don, Nick, and I have been able to just clarify the roles. So we know what Donovan's responsibilities are. We know what Jason's are. We know what Nicholas's are. And there's very little crossover in that space, which helps if you are going to work with family. But it's been interesting integrating my wife, for example, to find her voice within that space. And working with your spouse is a difficult thing, because now instead of talking about, you know, husband and wife stuff after dinner, you're still talking about business stuff. And being married is hard enough. There's enough fights just talking about husband and wife stuff. You don't need to bring extra fights into the equation. So that's been technical and interesting, but I think we've made some great strides again, because what my wife brings to the table, nobody else is physically doing. And I think that has helped tremendously. But it's a tricky one. We got lucky, and we know that.
So to wrap up, we've talked about quite a bit around in terms of your changing perspective and the transformation of your perspective, and also kind of how you approach work.
Yeah.
What's occupying your time and your mind other than nothing now? How do you see the next whatever period is important to you rolling out in terms of from a work perspective, from a personal perspective?
Man, pre-COVID, it was easy to answer this question because I felt like I had, 5 years line of sight. I could tell you what I was going to do, what was happening next. COVID has kind of changed that because the landscape changed tremendously. I think the timing of a pandemic with the world's technical capabilities has also created a completely different landscape. I've got new competitors now. I mean, you must remember how quickly the world has been changing. When I started comedy just over 12 years ago, if you wanted to laugh, you had to go to a comedy show. At the moment, I'm competing with not only all the social media platforms, YouTube, the streaming platforms, Netflix. You want to watch a comedian, you can watch them at any time. But I'm even competing with WhatsApp. You think about how many times somebody sends you a meme or something that makes you laugh just on WhatsApp. That's now my competitor, and that's up to 2019. COVID comes along and you have this whole birth of digital comedians, whether they are TikTok comedians, YouTube comedians, but a whole new sector under the kind of banner of comedy, which has again disrupted a very sensitive and small market. So it's meant that I've had to pull back and kind of have a look, because I'm a very cautious traveler and very much like you, I don't see the point in rushing. And I'm at an age where if I am going to move, let the moves be important. You know what I mean? We're not just doing anything. So my assessment at the moment is the landscape is very difficult. I think you've got to choose where you want to fit in very, very carefully and understand that the consequences of old school, we'd speak about your 15 minutes of fame, but I don't think that's been as obvious as it is today.
Yeah.
Because today you can be world famous this week and forgotten in 2 weeks' time. And if you're not talented, today you can base your whole business on a social media following, and somebody hacks your account and steals your following. And then if that was your only asset and you don't have talent to back it up, you're done. And I know many, many artists that had their accounts hacked that were somebody, and now you'll go, I remember, sort of, you know what I mean? When you think about them, because to rebuild, because they've had their 15 minutes, they had their little growth spurt of follows. And now people have seen it, heard it, done it. So I think you've got to choose a lot more carefully. So for me to answer your question, number one is content. I think the world is consuming more content than ever, and I think that allows us to think a little bit differently than the way we did before. So instead of just thinking about the communities, within a 20-kilometer radius from who's going to come and watch a live show, I now can be, I think, a lot more niche in my offering, because I can spread that blanket of finding my target audience globally because of the internet, instead of just focusing locally, which is definitely something I think all entertainers should be playing with, in terms of just dollarizing your income stream somewhat, just to bolster yourself, to make sure you're doing some stuff out of the country. And then I found myself in a great niche of, corporate comedy. And I do a lot of corporate comedy and corporate facilitation, where I just combine, my corporate experience from the past with my MC experience from the past with now, stand-up comedy. And I've come up with a number of different products, and I'm working at the moment, weirdly, with an organizational culture of business that do change management as their core. Just because I think there are so many things that the corporate space is going to need messaging-wise. So whether they're dealing with things like diversity and inclusivity, all the way through to just basic mental health issues, I think that, corporates are going to have the pushback of COVID, like with everything. So you have an economic crisis 2 years after the government says the economic crisis is over. That's generally when the man on the street is still feeling it.
Yeah.
And I think COVID may be done, but the mental impact and business impact that comes with that, I think, is a space I want to play in, just in terms of identifying where the needs are. So instead of offering just facilitation, I'm moving into corporate speaking now. So I'm in the final stages of developing the actual corporate talk, which will then form a part of a series. But instead of selling to the marketing manager, I'm now selling to the HR manager, which is very, very different. The marketing manager, generally, my business was 100% reactive. So if you're having an event, I would then form a line item as an entertainer under that event. But now I'm trying to create the events and go, listen, you need to talk to your staff about X, Y, and Z, and let me make it easy for them. And the way I do that is I'm one of very few speakers that allows corporates to tell their staff they are being incentivized and entertained, and we can seed the messaging into the comedy set. So if you're inviting your staff on a Friday for a diversity and inclusivity session, everybody's sad because nobody wants to talk about that stuff at 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
But if you go, guys, it's been a stressful time, we're incentivizing you, got a comedy show by Jason Goliath, come through. Nobody questions that either. They all think, that's great, let's go and listen to the comedy set. I sit then with the leadership within that business, understand in terms of how we can integrate and seed the messaging of their strategy or whatever it is we're trying to roll out. And so far, so good. It's been great.
It's brilliant, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Listen, I do understand, you can cut this out if you want, but I hope you know that you are a giant. And I hope you know how many young brown boys you've inspired over the years, just in terms of your sheer consistency. And you've got a way of being honest, which is so brutal and gentle. And not many people have that type of command. So we need you. And thank you is all I want to say.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Listen to Your Footsteps podcast. I'd appreciate it if you could subscribe and or leave a comment wherever it is you're listening. To access the book, there are links on the website www.kojobafa.com. If you're interested, there's also a curated email newsletter that I put out fortnightly to monthly. You can subscribe at zebraculture.substack.com. I hope you enjoyed listening and walk away with something that makes your world a little bit easier.